The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. The thousand injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best as I could, but when he had ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unjust when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unjust when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who had done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my good will. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my spell now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato. Although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared, he prided himself on the connoisseurship in wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and opportunity, to practise imposture upon the British and Australian millionaires. In painting, in Germany, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack, but in the matter of old wines he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him materially. I was skilful in the Italian vintages myself, and bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening, during the supreme madness of the carnival season, that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore a motley. He had on a tight-fitting party strip dress, and his head was surmounted by the conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him, and I thought should never have done wring his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you are luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking to-day. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" he said. "Amontillado? A pipe? Impossible! In the middle of the carnival." "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you in the matter. You are not to be found, and I'm fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado! I have my doubts. Amontillado! If I must satisfy them. Amontillado! As you are engaged, I am on my way to Lucchesi. If any one has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from Sherry, and yet some fools will have its taste for a match of your own. Come, let us go." "Whither?" "To your vaults." "My friend, no, I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement, Luchesi." "I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no, it is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are affiliated. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre." "Thus go none the less. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon, and as for Luchesi, he cannot distinguish Sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on the mask of black silk, and drawing a roquelaire closely upon my person. I suffered him to hurry me to my palazzo. There were no attendants at home, and they had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. Those orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from the scones 2 flambeaux, and gave one to Fortunato, bowed him through several suites of rooms to the archway that led to the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came to the length of the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Monstros. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe," said he. "It is farther on," said I. To observe the white web-work which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned towards me and looked in the eyes with two filmy orbs that distilled the rheum of intoxication. "Night, sir?" he asked at length. "Night, sir," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said, with decision, "we will go back. Your health is precarious. You are rich, respected, admired, beloved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me, it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Luchesi." "Enough," he said. "The cough is a mere nothing. It will not kill me. I shall not die of a cough." "True, true," I replied. And, indeed, I had no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this mediocre will defend us from the damps. Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle, which I drew from the long row of its fellows that lay upon the mould. "Drink," I said, presenting the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiar, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us." "And I to your long life." He took again to my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he said, "are extensive." "The Monstros," I replied, "were a great and numerous family." "I forget your arms." "A huge human foot door to a field azure. The foot crushes the serpent rampant, whose fangs are embedded in the heel." "And the motto?" "Nemo me impune lacet." "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes, with the bed jingled, and own fancy grew warm with the Medoc. We had passed through the walls of peeled bones, with casks of puncheons intermingling, into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato by the arm and elbow. "The nightfall," I said, "see, increases. It hangs upon the moss of these vaults. We are below the river's bed. Your cough of the moisture trickle among the bones. Come, we'll go back ere it's too late. Your cough, it isn't nothing," he said. "Let's go on. But first, another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached the flagon of De Grave. He emptied it into a breath. His eyes flashed with a fierce life. He laughed and threw the ball upwards in gesticulation. I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise. He repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "Do you not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood." "How?" "You are not of the Masons." "Yes, yes," I said. "Yes, yes." "You? Impossible! Mason?" "Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "A sign." "It is this," I answered, protruding a towel from beneath the folds of my reliquaire. "You jest," he examined, recoiling a few paces. "But let's proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the tool beneath the cloak, and again offering him my arm. He leaned upon it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through the range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descended again, arrived at a deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeaux rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with the human remains, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. Three sides of the interior crypt were all ornamented in this manner. From the fourth side the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound of some size. Within the wall, thus exposed by displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess. in depth about 4 feet, with 3 in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have constructed for no especial use within itself, but formerly merely the interval between the two of the colossal supports of the roof of the catacombs, and was backed by one of the circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was vain that Fortunato, uplifting his tall torch, endeavored to pride the depth of the recess. Its termination and feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," said I. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lachesis—" "He is ignominious," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, followed immediately in finding the progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more and I fettered him to granite. In its surface were 2 iron staples, distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing the links around the waist, it was but a work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the nitro. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more let me implore you to return. No? Then I must positively leave you. But I must first render you a little attention in power." "The Montoyo!" ejaculated my friend, not yet recovered from the astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself along the pile of bones on which I had before spoken. Throwing them aside, I had soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had was a low moaning cry from the depth of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was a long and abstained silence. I had laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations of chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might not hearken to it with the more satisfaction, I ceased my labours and sat down upon the bones. When at first the clanking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished upon the interruption of the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon a level with my breast. I again paused, and held the flambeau over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a moment I hesitated, I trembled, unsheathing my rapier, began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs, and I felt satisfied. I approached the wall. I replied the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamor grew still. It was now midnight. My task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered in. I struggled with its weight. I I placed it partially, but in a destined position. But now there came from out a low niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "Ah, ah, ah, it's a very good joke indeed. An excellent jest. We shall be merry rich off as spots over wine." "The Montolio," I said. "Yes, the Montolio, but it's not getting late. Will there not be awaiting us at the Plazo? Lady Fortunato and the rest? Let us be gone." "Yes," I said, "let us be gone." "For the love, monsieur!" "Yes," I said, "for the love." But those words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again. Fortunato! No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture, and let it fall within. There came forth in reply only a jingling of bells. My heart grew sick on account of the dampness of the catacombs. I hastened to make an end of the labor. I forced the last stone onto its position. I plastered up. Against the new masonry I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For half of a century no mortal has disturbed them. And pass risquat.
And that is the story of the Cask of Amontillado. I hope you enjoyed it.